Hello, guys. Welcome back to Starcastic Remarks. And alongside Chris and his crazy looking hair, my name is Ryan Chambers. We are the official Dallas Stars podcast of THPN. Thank you to THPN for being with us as always. And also thank you to our sponsors, BetterHelp, DraftKings Sportsbook, and brand new sponsor for the show. We've also got SeatGeek as well. SeatGeek is a brand new sponsor to the network. So please go and use that promo code THPN the next time you go and use their services. Anyways, Chris, how are you doing this fine evening?
Doing great. It is finally hockey week, and I'm ready to get going.
Yep. There is a ton to get to. There's a lot to kind of focus in on. And of course, I wanted to try and be a little bit different than all of the other shows that are also doing their season preview. We saw DLLS. They did their season preview today. Joey over at Locked On Stars did his a couple of days ago with Uri. So what did I do for our season preview? I didn't even tell Chris what I did. You know what any logical person did that I didn't know what to talk about? Here's what I did. I went and asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT came up with a couple of okay questions that we're going to ask here tonight alongside as we go through everything here this evening. And there's some actually fairly interesting ones and some fairly interesting stats that ChatGPT pulled up. So we'll talk about that when we get to it. But Chris, we know what the final roster is. We saw that unfortunately Huru and Lind were the odd man out, and Oscar Back wins that job as the 13th forward. Nils Lundqvist obviously wins that job as the number 6 defenseman, and it looks like Brendan Smith is going to be the number 7 guy on the blue line. Honestly, for me, nothing surprising. Nope. This is exactly what a lot of people thought before training camp even started.
Yep, that's what we thought would happen. That is what happened. Bischel put up a really good fight in DeBoer's comments, which he is back. So he spoke to the media today. In his little interview he did, he mentioned that there were thoughts about both forwards and defensemen. So Bischel definitely pushed his way up in there to at least make people have some thoughts at least. So we talked about it all during the preseason. All the guys who were on the bubble all played really well. And that kind of led to it being the way we thought it would be because nobody played particularly bad. Everyone played well. So it ended the way we thought. Oscar Back gets the job probably mostly because he's been in the Stars organization longer. It's probably the main thing that puts him over the edge there. And then he's also got that penalty killing and great defensive mindset that he had. In the interview that DeBoer gave, he said he's kind of like he's a known quantity. Like he's not going to make the wrong decision. He might not be as flashy as Huru would be, but he's also not going to make very many mistakes. And then Lundqvist is going to get his chance. We knew that was going to happen. So,
and it seems like everyone is in agreement with this when it comes to Nils, is that he's going to be on a very short leash. It seems like, and we have kind of talked about on this podcast that we would like to see him given a little bit more leash out. So instead of 10 feet out, give him 20 feet out on the leash. I think that's going to be the only way that he develops. And he's only a year younger than Miro Heiskanen. He's 24 years of age, and he's basically at that age is kind of what you see is what you get.
Yeah, and they definitely did that during the preseason. I mean, he normally had the most time on ice of any defenseman. And in the last game, he was actually on the ice during the 3-on-3 overtime, which is likely never going to happen during the regular season, but they're getting him in as many situations as they can to see what he's going to do. I wouldn't say he's passed all of those tests, but it's better to get him in there, see what we got, and then, as I'm sure we'll talk a little bit later, there are things the Stars can do to work around that depending on what Nils Lundqvist turns into this season.
Okay, so we kind of hit a couple of the highlights we talked about last week with the preseason battles that there wasn't much to be said, just because this is a very veteran-laden lineup. It was pretty obvious that Logan and Maverick were both going to make it, which they both did. And as they both should. They both showed last year that they don't need to be in the AHL anymore. They're ready for NHL action. But where do you want to start, Chris? What's the thing that you want to pick out first?
Well, I think we should start with the weakest part of the Stars team right now, and that's going to be the right side on defense. So I've kind of put together a little mock lineup here, thanks to our friends over at Puckpedia, Rip Cap Friendly. Kind of projected if the Stars are 100% healthy, the right side for the Stars is going to look like Matt Dumba, Ilya Lyubushkin, and Nils Lundqvist, which, man, that's like probably bottom 15. Whereas your left side with Heiskanen, Harley, and Lindell is like top 3, maybe top 2. So it's pretty drastic difference between which side of the defense you're looking at.
And based off of what we've seen in the preseason, Chris, they seem fairly straightforward that they're going to go with this lefty righty situation, at least to start the season.
Yep.
How long do you give it if it doesn't go well? Should we expect 5 games? Should we expect 20 games? What do you think?
Yeah, that's kind of the question. It depends on where does it not go well. If it's Nils Lundqvist that doesn't go well, I think unfortunately you're going to suffer with that for a little bit, just because of how much Jim Nill loves Lundqvist and sees the potential in him. So he's going to get an extended amount of time and is going to have to play bad enough to where even Jim Nill has to admit, okay, yeah, it hasn't worked. And at that point, I wouldn't be surprised to see if he gets cut out completely and Liam Bichsel gets brought up and there's some shuffling around. And another scary part of the defense for me is seeing how Harley plays with Lyubushkin. Obviously, Harley took a huge step last season and was fantastic, fully earned his new deal that he got. He's a $4 million defenseman now. He's not entry level. He's not a rookie. He's not a new guy. This guy is a solid NHL starter and a great number 2 on the left side. But pairing him with Lyubushkin, who's had some problems, but has the size advantage. But other than that, all of his advanced analytics look terrible. I see that as a pain point potentially on the defensive side. I saw a funny thing on our Facebook group that we're in, and it said that it is a great idea to put Lyubushkin next to Harley so that his value goes down for when he resigns his next contract.
Well, if that's how negative someone's going to be, then you really don't want that. You don't want Harley and Lyubushkin. You want to see them kind of grow, get some chemistry going. You want to see the advanced analytics for Lyubushkin go up. Yeah. Now, that being said, I am a firm believer in advanced analytics, but it is not everything, because there is a lot of advanced analytics that say Nils Lundqvist is a great player, and we both know based off of what we've seen this preseason that is in fact not the case. So if these pairings don't line up, here's what I would expect to happen. Obviously, Miro would get thrown down over to the right side. Harley would go back up there. And then we'd see Matt Dumba and Lyubushkin slide down. And then Lindell would go to the second pairing. And that would mean that who would be on that third? Yeah, so I think that you would have 2 righties on the third pairing, which would be kind of rough.
No, I think what would actually happen is what I just popped up right here on the screen. Thanks to Puckpedia.com. Go check out Puckpedia. Not a sponsor. I think it would go back to what we had last season for our top pair. It'd be Harley Heiskanen. Lindell would bump up and play with Dumba, and then you'd have Bichsel with Lyubushkin on the bottom pair.
So you really think they would not give Brendan Smith a shot, and they would just automatically pull up Liam Bichsel, even if he's not ready?
From what? Well, I think Bischel's already ready. I think the only reason he's not there is because you don't want him to be your number 7. I think Bichsel would.
I don't even think you want him. I don't even think you want him in the bottom pairing. I think you want him in the top 4, honestly.
You would want him in your bottom pairing if you're at the end of the season and you're pulling a Thomas Harley from 2 years ago. That's kind of the situation I'm seeing this come up from. This is so the first lineup was my start of season. This is what's going to happen. This is my end of season, what I think is going to actually end up being the case. But I think Bichsel is a much better option than Smith would be, especially considering those preseason games that Smith played. He was terrible. He was terrible in those preseason games. And I expect him to play much better than that in the regular season, but that was not a great great beginning looks for me.
No, and that was something that I talked about at depth on X, especially on the Sarcastic Remarks X feed. It was just, I was absolutely not impressed with Brendan Smith. And I was kind of hopeful for him because of how many games he played. I mean, like I said, he played over 50 games for the Devils last year. And from what I was told, he was actually okay as a number 6 guy over there. So And again, they had a lot of injuries over there, which is probably why he got into as many games as he did. But I was still hopeful, and my hopes were shot based off of what I saw in the preseason.
Yeah, but I think this kind of deep pair that I've got on the screen now with Thomas Harley, Miro Heiskanen, Lindell, Matt Dumba, Bishop Labushkin. If I had to gamble on what the deep pairs would look like, game one of the playoffs, this is what I'd put my money on right here. I've been burned too many times on the Lundqvist train, so that's what my money would be on. But that's not what we have right now. So I'm gonna go back to our original starting lineup look right here.
I like the starting lineup as well. The whole lefty righty thing looks really good. Now,
Yeah,
the biggest the biggest question that I have about this, Chris, and it's what a lot of people are talking about as well, is Thomas Harley. It's not the fact of can he be in the top four, because obviously he can. He's a great defenseman, and he showed it last year. But is he going to be able to run his own pairing? Because
Exactly.
that seems silly to kind of talk about, but he had a majority of the season with one of the best defensemen in the National Hockey League last year on his right side. So this year is going to be a lot different now, and that's not a slight to Labushkin at all. I think he played okay in the preseason, but he's not Miro Heiskanen. So
No.
is Thomas Harley going to be able to run his own pairing like Miro Heiskanen can on that top pairing? Because if he can, then this experiment going lefty righty will last a lot longer than if he wasn't able to.
100% agree. That's a good point. And I mean, just to show you that what you're saying can absolutely happen, Miro Heiskanen made Roman Polak look like a top pairing defenseman for a year. That's crazy. So that's absolutely a factor. And it's going to be up to Harley. He took a big step last season. He's going to have to do it again because he's absolutely going to be pushing his pair. He's the better player of the two by a pretty wide margin, I would say. And he's going to be very responsible for especially getting the puck out of his own end and moving up ice, because Labushkin's going to be the guy that can go win puck battles and make some big hits in his own end, but he's known even less than Dumba to be a guy that's good with the puck on his stick. So that Harley was a question mark to begin last season, and I think he's got another one just because of how much of a bigger role he's being expected to make.
Right. And we've talked about with all of these young guys and the fact that there weren't much expectations on them last year. I mean, Harley had a little bit more because of what we saw in the playoffs last season.
Mhm.
But, even Wyatt Johnston, we didn't expect him to come out and lead the Stars in scoring. And now that all of those guys have kind of, I don't want to say exploded, but they have definitely developed, and they've taken that next step with Stankoven, Bork, Bishop, Harley. I mean, all of these young guys. Are they going to be able to take that next step? And Harley falls right into that category. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does. And Ardell over here, $4 million says Harley better do it.
100%.
Yeah.
When you see that number next to him instead of under $1 million, yeah, your expectations are going to go up, and they should.
Right. And he got a 400% salary increase from last year. Wait, what did he make last year? Like 935,000.
I think it was just under $1 million. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. So that will be very interesting to see. Now, the other thing that we also do need to discuss with the defense is this is also very situational. I think we can say that with pretty good confidence that it's going to be situational. Here's what I mean. If it is a defensive zone face-off, we ice, or I guess you can't ice the puck, but like if it's in our own zone, it's the beginning of a penalty kill or whatever. You're not going to see, obviously, Harley and Lundqvist out there, right? You're going to see probably Esa Lindell and Matt Dumba. That would be my expectation. Yep. Or even Miro and Labushkin or something like that. So I think it's going to be very situational based as well. So you're not going to see these guys exclusively play with each other like Miro with Dumba and all that stuff. But it's going to depend on what the situation is. Are we down 2 goals? Are we up by a goal trying to hold a lead? We might see less of Lundqvist and a little bit less of Harley and more of the bigger guys.
Yep.
I think that's something that we can also kind of discuss a little bit and make sure that Stars fans are aware of too.
100%. Yeah. Miro Haskin is so good. He's going to play with probably everybody on the defense at some point this season. Uh, and you bring up a good point. I mean, you might see just 5-on-5, you might see Haskin and Harley put together if you need a goal late in the game. That would be fantastic, putting your two best offensive defensemen together. On your penalty kill, I'm assuming we're going to see Lindell Dumba on your top PK pair to try and match what him and Hakanpää did last year. I hope we still keep Heiskanen off the ice on the PK. So I'm thinking Harley Labushkin is probably your other pair on the PK. Yeah, Heiskanen is so good. He's going to force his way to playing with everybody because that's how he needs to. That's how he's going to get up to those crazy minute numbers that he gets to. And that's just how good Miro Heiskanen is. You have to play him more.
Couple of questions and that popped into my mind, and they're mostly about Lundqvist because obviously he's the number 6 guy. He's down there. But first one is, could we maybe see him on the second power play unit? Because in a way, I could see at times where maybe they could go with a Harley Miro option on the first power play unit, which I think would be okay. I think that both of those guys are more than capable offensively to get it done. Now, it's not very likely we see that, but if they do go with that, then that would open up the option for maybe Nils Lundqvist to go onto that second power play unit. I highly, highly doubt it, but especially early on in the season, if you're trying to get Nils Lundqvist going, like it seems like he really needs that, maybe that little bit of confidence in allowing him to have that second power play unit, maybe that would give him a little bit more pep in his step and he'd play a little bit better. But again, I highly, highly, highly doubt it.
Yeah, they haven't been practicing that at all during training camp, and it just doesn't make sense to. You're either doing what you said with 2 defensemen on the first power play unit, which in that case you're taking. Who are you taking off? Ben off your first power play unit or Johnston? That's crazy.
Exactly.
And the other option is you're taking Harley off the second power play unit, and he was your best defensive scorer last year, which is also crazy. So it's good to have a security blanket back there. If like either Harley or Haskin were to get hurt, we know Lundqvist can lead a power play. He has offensive skill to do it, but I don't think that's where he's gonna kind of excel. I think what they want to see from him more than anything is that he can be an everyday NHL defenseman and not make those dumb mistakes in his own end like he did last year.
And then the last thing about the defense, and then we can move on to something else here, Chris. But the question I wanted to ask you is this. Did Nils Lundqvist only get a contract from the Dallas Stars because Jani Hakanpää, they thought, was not going to play hockey again? Because I was listening to SDP again, the Steve Dangle podcast today, and they were talking about Hakanpää. And I was just like, you know what? And just in the back of my mind, I was thinking maybe that's why he ended up getting a contract after all, because they were thinking, well, he's a right-handed defenseman. He's been around for a long time now with the Stars going into his 3rd season. He knows the system. And honestly, there's probably not much better than him out there on the right-hand side. What do you think?
I don't think that's the case at all. I think this is a Jim Nell project that he just does not want to let go of. And we know how much he values those first round draft picks, and the fact that he gave one away for this guy and he's not panning out exactly the way he wants him to, I think that really hurts him inside because he loves those draft picks. So
right.
I think this is more of a Jim Nill ego thing, and him believing what his eyes are telling him more than what the numbers are telling him and what Pete DeBoer is telling him than it is we just needed somebody there, because we could have had Harley Heiskanen as our top pair and had Bichsel up here to start the season. That totally could have happened, but
they really wanted they finally wanted to go with the whole lefty righty thing and put Miro on the strong side, which they have never done with him as a number 1 Dallas Stars defenseman.
Yep.
So we'll have to wait and see how all of that kind of pans out. But anything on the defensive side, I guess with the defenseman, anything else?
I'll reiterate the last point you made, that the other thing to watch is to watch for Miro Heiskanen's offense to get better. That's what a lot of people think are going to happen with him going to his strong side. Miro doesn't think that's going to happen. The coaching staff doesn't really think that's going to happen. But ideally, that is what happens, is Miro gets better playing on his strong side. So I don't know how much better you can get being as good of a defenseman as Miro is, but maybe it unlocks something crazy and he goes sicko mode. That's the ideal scenario for why we have Miro playing on his left side now.
Okay. All right. All right, moving on from the defenseman. Obviously, that's the biggest weakness of this team, and still, it's pretty good.
Pretty
I
dang
know
good.
Matt Dumba is not,
It's not a
you
top
don't
pairing
want
guy, but
right, but he's for what we have and considering the cap hits and everything like that. You know what? We'll take it. It's not terrible. So okay, moving on from that, let me ask you a couple of Chat GPT questions because it's very interesting here.
the playoff Chat GPT is already back. That's
Yes,
crazy.
exactly.
He's invading the regular season now.
Right. So, and something we haven't talked about a lot is the coaching staff and maybe some changes philosophically that they might be looking at going from last season going into this season. So here's the question, Chris. You ready? How has the coaching staff's philosophy evolved since last season? What tactical changes should fans expect to see? So if you are what you are, which is a major Dallas Stars fan, and we've analytically dissected this team for like 4 years now.
That is what I am.
What's something that you could see evolving when it comes to their coaching philosophy?
Well, the main thing that kind of sucked overall as a team was their ability to play at home. Their road record was a lot better than their home record was. I think a large part of that is due to Otter just playing better on the road. I think that's a bigger deal. So maybe we see a lot more of Casey DeSmith at home than we do see of Otter. I think that would be a good idea for the coaching staff to adjust. And then when the playoffs came around, the biggest way we lost to Edmonton was not adjusting on special teams, the penalty kill and the power play. I mean, yeah, we got beat, but we also didn't try to change anything because it had worked great all season. It worked great the first 2 rounds. Why would it stop working now? We're going to stick to our guns. But Edmonton was playing us in such a different way than we had been played against that we had to make some kind of adjustment, and there wasn't one. And that's the thing that I think you have to learn from last season. You can't try and beat the Edmonton Oilers while you're getting dominated on special teams by like -10. You have to keep it close.
That's the thing I think I was going to answer with, Chris. You kind of went a full circle around it with a lot of things, but what I want to see them do, and we won't see it till the playoffs, is they need to make adjustments quicker in the playoffs and not rely on oh well, this had worked all season, and we're just going to push. They'll figure it out. Sometimes they're just not going to figure it out, and you just got to push that button and just do something different, just because it's different, not necessarily because you think it's going to work better. Just sometimes you just need to refresh your mind a little bit, get out of the gutter, and just try something different.
And there's a flip side of that coin too, though, because if you do that too early, when maybe they could have figured it out if you didn't change it so quick. I mean, there's 2 sides of that coin, but that's where DeBoer makes his big bucks.
Yes,
He's got to decide when to push the button. Last season, he didn't push the button at all, and I think that was the mistake.
And I think that's something that we're going to expect not just from Pete DeBoer, but from the entire coaching staff in general. Is I'm at least I'm hoping in the playoffs, assuming we make the playoffs, which God forbid we don't make the playoffs. This team ought to be a playoff team. I want to see them be able to make adjustments quicker and not be afraid to flip that switch. And maybe that's why we'll see a lot of different line combinations here at the beginning of the season. But it really just depends on what the coaching staff wants to do. Do they want more chemistry among these guys, or are they going to be willing to know that anybody can play with anybody, and if something's not working, they can just on a dime just go, okay, it's time to switch it up. And I hope they do, because that's something I want to see from them specifically.
Agreed.
Okay. You want another Chat GPT question?
Let's do some more Chat GPT.
Let's do it. Okay. This one was actually very interesting because this was something that we didn't have to deal with a lot of last season, but we're already having to deal with even in the preseason. Injuries. So how critical will it be for the Stars to maintain player health this season, and which players' health are most pivotal to this team's success? And I think there's one player in particular, but I'll let you have the floor first.
Yeah, I mean, the Stars have been lucky with this the past couple of seasons and not getting a long-term loss from our players. Though when we do get injuries, it tends to be our best players, Ottinger and Heiskanen and Robertson and Hintz. But Anyway, I digress. The player that's going to have to stay healthy the most is Jake Ottinger this season. And it's not just avoiding injury, it's also his use. We saw it was 2 seasons ago. We pushed hard to get that top spot in the Central Division, wore Ottinger into the ground, and he had his worst playoffs that he's had in the NHL thus far. That wasn't as bad this year or this past season because he had a little bit more rest going into the playoffs, but he didn't play up to his full potential, I feel like, in the playoffs. But he's been injured, I think, the past 2 seasons that he's played as well. So it's important to keep him healthy, play him less games. And I think that was the plan by the coaching staff. I think they said at some point during training camp, they're looking at keeping him.
I think your audio went out, Chris, again. But anyways, a lot of the stuff you said is exactly right. I think Ottinger is the key person there, and we really need that Ottinger from the Calgary Flames. Oh my goodness, Jacob reading my mind there. We need the Ottinger from the Calgary Flames postseason final for this year. Yep. So that's what I'm really hoping that we get from him going into the playoffs. Now, the nice thing about this, Chris, I feel a lot better about this compared to last season when it comes to the depth of the goaltending. Like from what we saw from Magnus Hellberg was absolutely fantastic in the preseason. Now, again, it was preseason. He was playing mostly against younger competition and prospects and more, developing guys, but still the saves that he made were not easy. They were absolutely not easy. So it's really going to be ecstatic if well, not ecstatic. That's the wrong word. I will be less freaking out if Otter or DeSmith goes down. And even I still think DeSmith, as much as we loved Wedgwood and, rip to Wedgwood in Nashville, but I think that Casey DeSmith is an upgrade over Scott Wedgwood, at least from the backup side. So it's going to be, and maybe that will allow Ottinger to play a little bit looser, and knowing that, he's that pressure is not all on his shoulders all the time. So I think there's something to be said there.
DeSmith is at least as good as Wedgwood was. Their numbers are very similar, and DeSmith had a pretty big role at the end of the regular season last year and that playoff push that they went on, and he did very well, actually. So, having a number 3 again is fantastic. We haven't had that since Dobby left, so having that extra security and not having to rely fully on your backup goalie if Otter goes down, that's going to be extremely helpful. I 100% agree with that.
Yes, he's not a young guy. Oh, sorry, I'm about to sneeze. Okay, and then as for the player health, that it is extremely critical. Obviously, we saw with the New Jersey Devils last year how much it was on their team, how many man games they lost, especially on their blue line. It was really bad. But generally the Stars have done really well when a player has gone down. And again, I know it's not a comparable when Miro Heiskanen went down last year, but it is very nice to know that we've got a Thomas Harley behind Miro Heiskanen, who he did pretty well as the number 1 guy when Miro was out for 7, 8-ish games.
Yeah.
He filled in admirably. And there's a lot more depth in the blue line this year than there was last year. You've got Kyle Capobianco. You've got Bichsel, like you mentioned. You still got Petrovic down there, who was playing in playoff games for us last season. So there is so much more depth, and they are way more prepared for injuries this year than they were last year. And again, credit to Jim Nill.
Agreed. Even in the forward position, I mean, if you can imagine a guy in the top 6 going out, and we have 2 replacements for that. We got Blumel and Hoover ready to go. You imagine a guy in the bottom 6 going out. We got replacements for that. We got Oscar Beck. We got Cole Lind. I mean, there's a lot of good options that can go into these spots, unlike last season. Last season, there's a little bit, what's going to happen if so-and-so goes down? It feels like there's a direct replacement for any guy that goes down in the lineup. Maybe not as good, obviously, or else they would be up there right now. But there's a guy who fills that role, at least, and has potential that we've seen during these preseason games.
All right. slightly switching gears a little bit here, but this was something interesting that I found when I was digging through stats when it comes to the full team stats. So not individual player stats, but team stats. And what I was doing, and as I was looking at the stars from last year and the stars from 2 years ago. All right. And for the most part, it is scary how consistent it was from last season to the season before that. But the one stat that I came up with that there was a big discrepancy, and for a positive thing, it was the winning percentage after being down after 2 periods. And it doubled. So in 2022, 2023, they had a .150. That was their winning percentage in that season. And then last year that jumped to over .3. It was .30 something. It was double the size. So that what that tells me right there is that the Stars last year, it didn't matter if they were down or if they were up. They they felt more, I don't want to say they were anxious about being down by a goal or more going into the second intermission, which is good. So that's something that I think needs to continue going into this season. We got to know that this team is never out.
Yeah, and that was something that the Stars are so good at that at points during the season. People were looking at that as a negative. They were like, "Wow, the Stars are winning games, but like, look how they're doing it. They're barely winning them." But that turned out to not be a problem at all. The reason that the Stars were able to be so confident in winning those games is because they always knew they had the chance of coming back. They always had that potential, and we especially saw that really early in the season last year and really late in the season. We're down to some pretty bad teams, and we had young kids that was the big game that Stankoven and Johnston blew up and came back 3 goals late in the game to win that one for the Stars. So there's a lot of ways the Stars that can win and a lot of ways they can come back. You're muted, Ryan. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I muted myself because I was sneezing like 4 times while you were talking. Everything Ardell is saying over here is exactly right. Chasing hockey is losing hockey. I remember Bruce Levine saying that numerous times over the years. And yes, he also said the league has trended that way too far for sure. And no lead was safe. And that was also very true going into
Yeah, I bet all
that
the
we
numbers
saw.
were up.
Yes, all the numbers were up. I thought that was still, noteworthy from the Stars to point that stat out particularly. I'd like to see that go up. And honestly, I would like to see less games where the Stars have to worry about being down after 2 periods. So I don't know if that's particularly on Otter or if that's just a team-wide thing. I think it's more of a team-wide thing, but we'll see if that continues from there. Now, a couple of other things that I noticed looking at the stats from this year compared or this past season compared to 2 seasons ago was the amount of regulation and overtime wins was much higher than it was last year. We had 5 more regulation or overtime wins this past season than we saw 2 years ago. And the only thing I would like to see more of from the Stars is I would like to see them finish games out in regulation because they basically had the exact same compared to last year. They had 39 2 years ago and 40 this past season. So that's something that I would like to see them kind of finish it out a little bit better than they did last year. But at the same time, credit to them for getting a couple more wins out of overtime than they did 2 years ago.
Yeah, I'll throw out one more obvious one. Learn how to play in game 1 of a playoff series. That'll probably be the key thing we're talking about before game 1 of the playoffs this season.
All right. Moving on from there, as my nose is just running. I don't know. All of a sudden, it's just weird. Okay. Let's go and let's talk about the forwards a little bit because this was a question that I also asked ChatGPT, and I was kind of thinking about the fact that obviously for Joe Pavelski is leaving. Who needs to step up? Those kind of things. But out of all the offense that they're losing, those 60 plus points that they're losing out of Joe Pavelski, who's the one that needs to step up the most? Because we've talked about a couple of names over the course of the offseason, but who's the biggest one?
Yeah, I think Jason Robertson's the guy who's going to get back a lot more points that he lost between the past 2 seasons. Another guy is Wyatt Johnston. He's taking a huge step for his career. He was actually the leading scorer last year for the Stars on the quote unquote third line, but he's moving into, hey, you're a superstar forward now, and you're playing on the top line of maybe the best Stanley Cup contender to start the season. So that's a pretty big jump there. His contribution is no longer sprinkles on top. His contribution is part of the Dallas Stars plan to win hockey games. So that's a big step there. And then after seeing what he did in the preseason, I think Logan Stankoven's a big part of that. I mean, he was so dynamic in every preseason game that he played. We saw how much tenacity he had for the puck and for shooting and for scoring at the end of last season and during the playoffs. And, all offseason, I'm kind of thinking like, there's no way that's just how he plays every game. That's just his energy from getting called up to the NHL finally. No, that's how Logan Stankoven plays every shift. And he's doing the same thing in preseason games. So if he can keep that going for a full 82 game season plus a couple extra months, then he's absolutely going to be a huge difference maker to make up those lost points for the Stars.
And I think that's the key when it comes to Stankoven is he going to be able to do it over an 82 game season? I think he's never been through an NHL season, right? There's not as many back-to-backs in the NHL like there is in the AHL, where you basically are a weekend league, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, some Sundays, and then the occasional Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday,
Yeah.
something. Yeah, mostly Tuesday, but still. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does, because there's a heck of a lot of travel. We've talked about it. The Stars are going to be the most traveled team in the NHL this season. Yes, some of that is well, but it's not just that though, Chris.
It would still be top 5 without it. Yeah,
it's geographically just the way that it is with the Stars. The fact that they're in the Central, and all of these teams that are in their division are much, much further away than like if they were in the Metro division.
And Arizona moving to Utah doesn't help that either.
No, it absolutely does not. So Stankoven is going to be a wild card for me. And I mean, we've seen that there's some expectation there, but nobody has any idea where the ceiling is, if that makes any sense. Like no one knows what to expect from him this season. Like, is he a 30 goal scorer? Is he just going to get 20 in his first full season? I mean, does he just explode and get 40 goals and go for 100 points? I mean, we really just don't know what he's going to end up at. And I mean, I think we'll be happy with whatever we get, but it's going to be really interesting watching him throughout the season, and he's going to have to pick up the loss of the points from Pavelski. I think he's the biggest one.
Yeah, he's part of it.
Now, the one that I'm most interested in to see how he does this season is Roope Hintz. I think he's the one that really truly needs to establish himself as a number one center, and he's done that. But I think it kind of goes back into my last question a little bit, is he needs to stay healthy for the entire season. And I mean, remember, we had one game at the beginning of the season last year, and he didn't play opening night. And the only reason why he didn't is because if he didn't play that one game, he had an entire week off before game 2. So that's going to be interesting to see what he does. I think he can get to that 100-point plateau. I really do. I really truly believe that. But he needs to take that extra step if the Stars are going to go off and be that Stanley Cup contender and that Stanley Cup winner like we really want them to be.
Yep, I agree. The Stars are always talked about with how great their depth is, but when you talk about top 10 centers in the league, he doesn't always make the list. He probably should, but he doesn't always, because he's not the flashy goal scorer like you're saying. And I think he definitely has a good chance with how this new line is gonna shake out with Robertson and now Johnston instead of Pavelski. It's gonna be a lot faster. It's gonna be a lot more geared to Hintz's style. He's gonna have someone skating with him instead of him just being the F1 and then passing it back to the other guys that are in position. He's gonna have guys banging bodies with him on the forecheck. So he has a chance to to grow more offensively because of how much faster I think this top line is going to be.
Now, one of the other things I wanted to talk about, Chris, with the forwards is something that Razor kind of pointed out on the DLLS podcast a couple of weeks ago when he was out there. He said what he really likes about the way the lines are appearing to shape out is that there's like a driver on all of the lines, if that makes any sense, right? So obviously Robertson is not the driver on his line. That's Rope, right? He's the guy that takes speed and he goes at the net and he's able to do that. On that second line, it's not Sagan. Who is it? It's Matt Duchene. And
I would say
Matt
it's
Duchene
as the F1.
As a forechecker, yes, but what I'm talking about is like a driver of offensive play. Duchene is the one that does that.
Yeah.
And then on the third line, I mean, what I would expect is Stankoven. Stankoven's going to be on that third line, I think, with Bork and with Ben. Although I think Bork is probably not going to play opening night because I think he's nursing an injury. But eventually, I think we'll see that a third line of that, and Stankoven is going to be the driver on that line. And then even when you look at the fourth line with Sam Still and or Evgeny Dodonov, either one of those guys could be a driver on the fourth line. So, I mean, what do you think about that aspect of the forward grouping? Is that something to be desired?
Yeah, I think on paper, this is what you want to happen. And that's this is the first thing we saw at training camp is when everyone kind of pencil whipped on the page as soon as we saw July 1st. This is what we all wanted, and that's what they're going to start with. They're going to see if it works. And it is a good time to mention Bork. They did say he is unlikely to play in the first game due to some kind of nagging injury that he has. So
very minor.
Yeah, they said very minor, but he's out for a whole week. And you're pretty sure of that? That seems crazy. But
and the other thing that, and I guess we're getting back to the injury part a little bit. Robo is going to be ready for the first game of the season. They've already mentioned that. And apparently Wyatt Johnston is also nursing like a very minor injury. That's literally how they put it. Very minor injuries for Bork and for
Johnston.
Literally just for Johnston. Thank you. I just said his name. Johnston will play opening night and Bork will probably not. So we'll see Oscar back in the first game. That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. And we'll likely see Duchene on that line with Ben is what I would expect. Not Duchene. Sorry, Dodonov.
Dodonov. Okay, I was about to say, he's like, you don't want to break up that second line with. I remember talking about them last year as
you can't break those guys
number
up.
One line.
They're only good with each other.
So the other thing is a couple of the other things I want to talk about is I'd like to see a little bit more snarl out of Jamie Benn and a little bit more out of Mason Marchment. We saw it a little bit last year. But one of the things we talked about at length is in the playoffs, we got bullied around a little bit the last two seasons, especially the last two playoff runs, I should say. And that's something that I would like to see the forward grouping do a little bit more. The defensive side is absolutely going to happen. When you add 400 hits with just the top two guys on the right side, that's going to help out tremendously. But I would like to see the forward grouping go a little bit harder in the forecheck and go for the body a little bit more. Wear guys down.
Yeah, I agree with that. We got to be in the conversation of wearing down the other team too, instead of just, can they wear down the Stars? That's been the conversation for the past more than 2 years, honestly. And Jamie Benn is going to have a big role in that too. He's going to be playing with Stankoven and Bork, and those are not large people. So he's going to definitely have to stick up for them a few times, and he's probably going to have a little bit more penalty minutes this year.
Okay, Chris. Do we want to move on to goaltending, or do you want another ChatGPT question?
Up to you. You're the host.
Okay, let's go with the ChatGPT question here. Okay. I've kind of already answered this question, but I'll get your thoughts on it. What are the realistic playoff expectations for the Stars this season, and what would constitute a successful season for this team? I have said cup or bust.
Yeah, the expectations for the Stars is winning the Stanley Cup. And the only success would be winning the Stanley Cup. Now, it's not like you have to win now this season. Sell everything you have to do it, because the Stars are going to be good for the foreseeable future, at least the next 2 to 3 seasons. But you got to go win the Cup now. You have everything there. Everything is in place. Lots of people think if we got past Edmonton that we would have had a dang good chance against the Panthers. I tend to agree with that. So at this point, with a team this good, that's been this good for 2 years, with a coach that's been here for a couple years, everybody's comfortable. Nobody's new. Everyone's ready. I mean, the time to win is now.
And this kind of goes into another question. I wasn't going to ask this, but they talk about, or ChatGPT asked about the long-term vision for the Dallas Stars, and are they in a win now mode or are they building for the future? Obviously, they're doing both. I think.
Stupid ChatGPT.
Yes, but at the same time, it's still a logical question to ask, because it's not like we are the Penguins who are, we're trying to get one last cup for our, aging core of Malkin, Crosby, and Letang. That's not the case with this team. Yes, we have guys who we want to win the cup who have been here for a long time, like Esa Lindell, Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin. But at the same time, you've got a bunch of young guys who are going to be very large pieces for this team this season. And for a lot of the young guys who took that step this season, they're expecting I should say that the front office is expecting a much larger step from the young guys as well this season.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see.
That's the really interesting part about the Stars, is that the leadership of the Stars is the older core that we've known since the 2016 season. At its heart, that's still the Stars, but the game of the team and who's actually going out and winning games, that's led by the new core. That's led by Roope Hintz, Robertson, Heiskanen, and Ottinger. That's who's going to help us win the cup. So we got the leadership from the old guys, but who's going to go do it is the new core.
This was a question that a friend of mine posed to me. Who I thought it was kind of funny. So last year, Shannon, the hockey guy on YouTube, he bet that the New Jersey Devils were going to win the Stanley Cup last season. And obviously we saw what happened to them. Guess who he picked for this season? He picked the Stars to win the Stanley Cup this season. So is that something we should be afraid of? Is there such thing as the hockey guy curse?
I sure hope not. But of any team that is like obviously a contender to start the season, the Stars are like the least likely team to actually drop off a cliff like that. Like you could even say the Oilers are betting odds favorites to win the Stanley Cup right now. They were at the bottom of the NHL after the first month of the season last year. Like that's a team that I could definitely see if a couple of things go wrong, that team could miss the playoffs. That's an actual thing that could happen. I think the Stars, so many things would have to go wrong for this team to be truly bad and to actually miss the playoffs. It's just so improbable. Please don't clip that. Please don't.
I was about to say, this is on the internet now. It's too late. We can't take that back.
Yeah, that's how confident I am in it, though. Like, there's so much stuff that would have to go wrong, and it totally could, but it just seems unlikely.
The depth of this team is ridiculous. Let's just say that. I think we're one of the deepest teams in the league. Yeah, we may not have the quote unquote top end talent like the Avalanche do. Obviously, they've got McKinnon, Rantanen, and Makar. Those guys are ridiculous. But after that, they don't have a lot of guys on the third line that can provide offense like our third line can. And our third line is as good as many teams' second lines. Yeah. So that's something to be said of the Dallas Stars and the fact that they have so much depth.
And the Stars could lose a whole line and a whole D pair. And you bring up Arttu Huru, Matej Blumel, and Lind, and there you go. That's an NHL line right there, automatically.
Yes, and all of those guys could play in the NHL, especially Huru. I was really impressed with Arttu Huru, and that's a great find by Jim Nell. Thank you, Gary Littman, probably.
Tangent for Huru. He is waiver exempt, so if we do lose somebody during the season, look for Huru to be one of the guys that gets called up, as is Blumel. Blumel is also waiver exempt, so those two guys I think would be the ones to look out for if there is a injury early on in the season.
So, okay. Let's move on. We're getting down to the nitty gritty of the time limit for our episode here today. So let's talk about goaltending here, Chris, and discuss the depth that is here. And we've already talked about Otter a little bit. And you have made mention that his home record needs to improve from last season, and the stats were drastic, at least in the regular season when it came to how he played. He loves being the villain on the road, which is good. We want that to continue, but we need to see a little bit more ego from him when it comes to him playing at home. Now, is that something that we still see a balance of him playing home and away games, or is it like you mentioned? Are we going to see a lot of Casey DeSmith at home? Maybe he plays 50% of the games at home, or what do you expect? What do you think is the toss up here?
I think it's going to be pretty similar to last year as far as his starts go. I would like him to play less home games just because I would like to give him more rest, and that gives us a better chance to win, in my opinion. But the big deal here is Jake Ottinger's mental and how he thinks about playing at home versus how he thinks about playing on the road. Because to me, those numbers show that it's obvious that he's doing something different. He's thinking about something in a different way. So he needs to find a way to tap into whatever he's doing on the road and bring it into his home stadium. It's and what we saw at the end of the year last year kind of proved to me fully that the only thing that can hold Jake Ottinger back is his mental. He's got all the skill in the world. He could be the best goalie in the NHL. He's got to figure out how to keep that mentality that he has on the road, and if he can find a way to switch it to God mode like he did in that Flame series a couple of years ago, he needs to figure that one out for the playoffs too. You're muted again, Ryan, so I can talk a little bit more about goalies if you want to pay attention to your dang mute button.
Sorry, I'm sniffling and like sneezing like ridiculous. But anyway, what I was saying was I don't want to say it like this, but I'm going to have to because I don't know another way to put this. But I don't necessarily know if it's like a mental aspect when it comes to like getting into his own head. I think it's just the environment around him. I think that's the mental part of the game that he needs to fight, because we saw in the playoffs that it's not that particular mental part of the game, like, the other team getting into his head, because he made some fantastic saves in the playoff series against the Oilers. And he did get outplayed by Skinner in that series, but he still had his moments where, that could have been the game-saving save that he had. And he had that in the first two series in the playoffs. So I don't want to say it's a mental part of that game in that aspect, but I think it's just the environment. He needs to figure out how to be the villain at all times. And maybe it's like we said a couple of weeks ago, maybe we just need to show up in the opposing team's jerseys and just boo him every time he makes a save. Yeah. So he thinks he's on the road. I don't know.
And that's what I mean by mental. He's got to find a way to pretend like he's like everybody in this building still hates him. Even when they're chanting his name, he's got to be like, these guys all don't think I can do it. Yeah, he's got to trick himself, is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about his mental. He's got to find a way to tap into that sicko mode that he gets on the road.
Jacob, as long as it's not an Oilers jersey.
I like the orange Oilers jerseys. I'm not going to lie. I think that's a top tier sweater.
Hey, random side thing. What do you think about the Anaheim Ducks going with this whole orange?
Beautiful.
Flash? I love it way better than what they've done the last half decade or whatever.
We lost the Kachina, but we brought back the Mighty Ducks. So
I love they should have. I understand that they changed ownership and stuff like that. So, but I love the Anaheim Ducks logo. It is so cool, and it's not just because of the movie series or anything like that. It's just a better logo.
That's a hockey logo, dude.
It's a hockey logo. Like, that's a legit logo. It's so much.
The other one could have been like a duck preservation.
That should be the name of the episode, duck preservation.
Yeah,
anyways,
people will find that.
Yeah, that duck preservation. What are they talking about on a Stars hockey podcast? What? Okay. Last aspect of the goaltending, and then I'll leave it with maybe one more question for you that we can just go all out on. Okay. What's the expectations for Casey DeSmith here? Do we expect him to have the same numbers as Scott Wedgwood? Do we expect him to be better than Scott Wedgwood? Do we just want him to just be a fill-in? I mean, or do we expect like Anthony Stolarz type numbers like we saw from Anthony Stolarz last year when he was in Florida? I mean, what do you think?
Uh, I hate to be rude. The backup goalie doesn't matter. When it comes to the playoffs, the important time of the season, we are not going to see Casey DeSmith unless Otter is hurt. And if that's the case, we're screwed beyond doubt. So DeSmith needs to give the Stars a chance. He needs to give them a chance to win games. He needs to let us win games 5-4 sometimes, and we've got to be okay with that. That's all that's got to happen. And if Otter does go down this year for several weeks like he has the past couple seasons, him and Hellberg have to give us a chance to go 500 during that time span, which I don't think will be a problem. I think Casey DeSmith is more than capable of that. I think Hellberg is capable of that, honestly. I think he's a lot better than people give him credit for. So, yeah, I'm not worried about the backup situation at all. You got to be kidding me, Ryan. You're doing it 3 times? Look at the button. It's bright red.
It's not 3 times. I've done it like 5 times now. Huh. Maybe I need to call this unmute episode. For me, when it comes to Casey DeSmith, I want to see him play in at least 20 games, and I want to see it like at least a 905. That would be my
great.
hope from him. And honestly, if we get that from him, we'll be fine. And
we'll win the President's Trophy with that.
Yes, and then the other thing I wanted to ask that I thought was kind of fun to kind of talk about was how many games do you think Magnus Hellberg gets in this year?
I hope
Like,
none, because if he gets in any, then Otter's hurt, or
Casey DeSmith.
Yeah,
because I mean he's gonna need some rest at some point. And the other nice thing about this also is that if Otter does get hurt for a period of time like he did last year, we don't have to ride Casey DeSmith into the ground like we had to with Scott Wedgwood. I think he played 17 games in a row last year, right?
Something crazy.
Before they threw Matt Murray in there for a game against Chicago, right? Yeah. So there's going to be a little bit more confidence with Magnus Hellberg if something like that does happen. So again, really nice to have that goaltending depth. Last question, and then we'll wrap it up here, Chris. This is a Chat GPT question. You ready?
I'm ready.
This is the fun one. Okay. What is your bold prediction for the Dallas Stars this season, whether it be regarding a player, a team achievement, or a significant event? And you cannot use win the Stanley Cup to answer this question. So
yeah, that's not even a bold prediction at this point. I feel
that's not really a bold prediction. So what's your bold prediction?
This one's going to be interesting. My bold prediction is that Miro Heiskanen does unlock something on his left side offensively. And he gets a few extra points, a few extra goals. He might not lead the league for defensemen in points, but he's going to be top 5. And with that, and with how good of a season he had last year and having more eyes on him and knowing what he can do, I'm going to say Miro Heiskanen wins the Norris Trophy this year. That is going to be my hot take.
That's not a huge hot take because that is possible.
It is possible. But what it would take is it's going to take
bold.
I think it's bold because he hasn't finished top 3 in Norris voting. And it's really going to take him. It's going to take the league not scoring a ton of points. Like there can't be one defenseman that runs away with it like happens every year. So if that happens, I still don't think that Miro is going to be able to overcome more than 15 or 20 points with his defensive prowess. But yeah, I think Miro's got a really good shot at the Norris this year, especially if he gets some more offensive power from the left side.
Okay, I have a realistic one, and then I have a really fun one. Okay, my realistic one is that Wyatt Johnston scores over 40 goals this season. That's my more realistic one. Now, my fun one is going to be this. Jamie Benn gets back to the 30 goal threshold again.
That would be
because the one I think that would be crazy, but on the opposite side of that, he's going to get more time in front of goalies on the power play, and that's mostly how he's done his damage in the last couple of years. 2 years ago, he got to the 30 goal threshold. Last year, he didn't have to as much because there were still a lot of guys who could score 20, but with him getting more power play time in front of goalies, and with looking at who he's going to be playing with on just regular 5-on-5 for the majority of the time, at least it looks like, it's going to be Stankoven and Maverick Bourque. And we saw how much that benefited Matej Blumel last year. Matej Blumel was an AHL All-Star last year. So
Cool.
I think that's something that that is fun to maybe think about, that he could get back to 30 goals.
Well, and really for the majority of the time, Stankoven and Bourque were actually playing with Curtis McKenzie, who is the AHL veteran, the captain of the Texas Stars last year. And he kind of has, I mean, I'm not saying he's a Jamie Benn, but he's an AHL version of Jamie Benn. He's a bigger guy. He's got that same kind of power forward play style. So it kind of matches up perfectly with Bourque and Stankoven coming in. They're slotting with the guy that they're very familiar playing with.
Let's clip this. I really hope Jamie Benn gets back to 30. Let's go. That would just be awesome. I would love to see him get back to that threshold again. So, okay. That's our season preview. I mean, we got hockey games coming live in 3 days' time. Yes, it's not on Victory Plus, but it's on ESPN Plus. It's going to be against the Nashville Predators. And then the season opener at home for the Dallas Stars will be on Saturday on Victory Plus. That's going to be very interesting.
Thursday is going to be hard to find. It's only going to be on ESPN Plus. So you got to either subscribe to ESPN Plus or don't tell me about what you're doing. Those are the two options. But it's also going to be the Predators are going to come out jumping. I mean, it's their home opener. Obviously, they had the craziest offseason with some huge acquisitions. Those guys are going to want to show the fans what they can do. So it's going to be a tough battle for the first game with the Predators. They're a whole different team.
That's going to be really, really, really fun. And that's one aspect we haven't even talked about. We haven't even talked about the rest of the Central Division when it comes to the season preview. We just ran out of time to talking about what just the Stars could do. And maybe that we could save that for another day. And maybe we do something on Wednesday or something like that to get you excited for the game against Nashville. We'll see if we have time for that. But for now, that's going to do it for us. Thank you guys so much for listening here live. If you're doing so, there's even more of you who are listening afterwards. We really appreciate it. Once again, thanks to our sponsors, BetterHelp, DraftKings Sportsbook, and the newbie to the THPN family, SeatGeek. Thank you to them as well. That promo code is THPN. Please go and use it for any of those services. SarcasticRemarksShop.com is the merch store. SarcasticRemarks.com is the website. Check out Chris's stuff on 100 Degree Hockey. I'm sure he's going to be ramping that up soon. And go and watch his stuff. Watch his stuff. Go read his stuff.
Read my stuff.
But you can watch our stuff here.
Watch our show.
Yeah, watch our show here. And I'm sure we'll do something on our hour show throughout the regular season where we do like a Texas Stars segment, and Chris can just go off on us about how the Texas Stars are doing and everything like
Only
that.
So that's going to be a jingle.
Only if there's a jingle. Now I'm gonna have to start working on that.
Someone make us a jingle.
Alongside Chris, my name is Ryan. We'll catch you guys on the flip side, and we hope you guys have a good, fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you guys are listening. And we will look forward to, at the very least, seeing you guys on Thursday evening after the season opener. Thank you guys so much. Go Stars.